Trump picked up with virtually every demographic group. He did way better with minority groups. He did way better with young voters. So in other words, it genuinely and sincerely looks like Trump doing that podcast circuit, doing Theo Von, doing Andrew Schultz, doing Joe Rogan. It looks like it helped him. It looks like it helped him. And I'm trying with all the power of my being to not lash out at these people. Oh, Jesus Christ. So did he have an impact on the election? Look, I think he probably did. I think he did. Look, I hate to say it, but the criticisms of him were correct. The people who were really harsh on him when I was easier on him, no, he's a good guy. He means well. He's trying his best. He's advocating good ideas. You guys are just hyper-focusing on the times when he says the wrong things. And he ended up endorsing the guy who stands against virtually everything he claims to believe in, right? And because of his humanization of Trump, because of his patty cakes interview with Trump, it had the exact effect that Joe himself feared it could have.
Yep, 100%. Do you want to segue into this Joe Rogan conversation?
Absolutely.
Zach, if we take a look at this video from Kyle Kulinski, I think he does a really good job laying out some of the issue here and the ways in which Joe Rogan was actually able to really help Donald Trump. How Donald Trump's podcast strategy, as much as we laughed at it, it actually 100% worked for the reasons we've been talking about. And we're going to continue to break down the ways in which the left needs to get on the right's level. To be honest, to be frank, I have some suggestions for you guys, but let's hear from Kyle first.
It's time to start. It's time to have that conversation. The day before the election, Joe Rogan endorsed Trump. Did that actually have an impact on the election? That's my question for you. Well, we got this video. This is totally random. This is totally random. This is on one of the news channels on MSNBC. Interviews being done with people waiting in line. Listen to this.
Masculine identity. We've actually been hearing a lot of talk about the Rogan podcast, Joe Rogan podcast. In fact, a little while ago, we were talking to two guys. One of them said that he was on the fence until he said when Kamala did not go on the Joe Rogan podcast, that was what influenced his vote. He ended up voting for Trump, but he said that he was open to listening to Kamala on the podcast, and when she didn't, again, not necessarily all the issues, but the fact that he said she didn't seem like a real person because she couldn't talk for an extended period of time.
Apparently, it's Joe Rogan's world, and we're just living in it, y'all.
And I actually hadn't seen that, Gavin, that news clip that Kyle reacts to, but it is so true. I thought this phenomenon was over. So egg on my face there, guys. Again, one thing about this show, Gavin and I aren't going to lie to you about the shit that we got wrong. I thought Joe Rogan's relevance at this scale was over, right? Gavin and I talked about how when we were in college, Joe Rogan was at this like insane pinnacle. It seems like he does still have a stranglehold over the people who listen to him. He's like the godfather, right? He's like the dad that they all project all their issues onto. Like, oh, if my dad were Joe Rogan, you know what I mean? Like they just treat his word as gospel. So you start to, the reason that I take this really seriously, Gavin, is I know that people will just regurgitate exactly what Joe Rogan says to them if they're says in his podcast, if they're one of his followers, right? And the way that they said, oh, she can't just have a long conversation, so she could just be a normal person. That's something that Joe Rogan 100% has said over and over and over and over again. Why? Because it's really self-serving to him to have people come on his podcast and do long-form conversations. But crazy that had such a meaningful impact on people.
Yeah. I mean, it did have a meaningful impact. And it's funny because Donald Trump, I don't even think he really did a good job on Joe Rogan. Like, it's not like they had a very interesting conversation. It was basically just Donald Trump rambling for 3 hours, going down whatever rabbit holes he wanted to. It was completely embarrassing to me. But I think Kyle's right, and that dude in that clip is right, that what really matters is that it proved Donald Trump was not only capable, but willing to have that 3 hour off the cuff conversation to people that says, yeah, I'm not afraid. I don't have anything to hide. Kamala Harris constantly was running this media strategy where it felt like she had something to hide. And it felt like she was just waiting, terrified to get asked the wrong question, terrified to have to say something mean about Joe Biden or address anything controversial. It was ridiculous. And Trump is never afraid to address anything controversial. Sometimes he'll make his own controversies worse by refusing to keep his mouth shut. He'll just say whatever he ones, and people do like that about him because at least he feels real. At least it feels like, okay, well, this guy is being honest with me, even though we all know he's one of the most dishonest losers in the entire country, right? But it does prove that. And I think that's where, Kamala was a uniquely poor candidate. Her inability to just be a freaking human being, to sit down and have an off-the-cuff conversation. She was really good on a script. She was really good on the debate stage. But when it came time to field easy softball questions, like I'm talking easy stuff, guys, Joy Behar on The View said, what's one mistake that you've learned from and that you'll do better next time? And Kamala couldn't answer it. She did like a 3-minute long word salad and laughed a bunch, but she could not answer it. Like it's not that hard. That's an easy question.
Apparently it's Joe Rogan's world. Look, I know this is anecdotal, but it's also the case that if you look at the numbers, Trump picked up with virtually every demographic group. He did way better with minority groups. He did way better with young voters. Kamala underperformed Biden's 2020 performance, and Trump overperformed Trump's 2020 performance. So in other words, it genuinely and sincerely looks like Trump doing that podcast circuit, doing Theo Von, doing Andrew Schultz, doing Joe Rogan, Aiden Ross, even though most of his viewers are probably 14. It looks like it helped him. It looks like it helped him. And I'm trying with all the power of my being to not lash out at these people, because based on the shit this dude was saying, we are literally talking about extremely low information voters. Hey, I was on the fence, but Trump went on, and therefore now I want to vote for Trump. It's like, oh my God, Jesus Christ.
I think it's important to talk about this, though, guys. And again, these are the people we need to reach. Almost everyone is a low information voter if you're using the threshold of somebody that would watch this podcast, or somebody that would watch Kyle's podcast, or somebody that would make podcast content about politics. Almost everyone is going to be a low information voter. This is something I got to give it up to my sister. My sister has worked in electoral politics a long time, and every single time I'm like, nah, man, it's going to be awesome. My sister's like, bro, I've knocked on a lot of doors in every single region of this country. And I'm telling you, everything that you think is reasonable to be concerned about, that's not what's going to come out of their mouth. They're going to tell you something crazy that you would have never, ever expected to hear from somebody when you're in like northern Minnesota. And yet they're concerned about what's happening in El Paso, Texas for some reason, right? Or like, oh, no, well, actually, my friend told me this about Donald Trump, and ever since then, I've just kind of liked him. That's the kind of way that people make their decisions, and we can't scoff at it. We can't just be like, ha, you plebs, you Philistines, you idiot dolts. No, those are the people that we need to relate to, because there has to be something from a cosmic standpoint, from a vibes standpoint. The energy that they're putting off to those people is more inviting on that side, and we were dogging on it. We were dogging on it, saying, how could you possibly believe that the right wing is more inviting than the left wing? And somebody like Anna Kasparian should know better, right? But I'm talking about people on the street seem to feel that way, and we need to make them feel like we're the ones that you want to hang out with, right? That we're the ones that are cool, that we're the ones that are going to mean progress for society, that the geriatric boomers of the world, the people that are hoarding all the wealth, the people who are making your life harder, the people who are making it impossible for you to have a family, buy a house, have children. Yeah, that's those people that are on the golf course, okay? It ain't us. It ain't the left, okay? And we're not doing a good job of that right now. I was talking to Griffin the other day. Tim Dillon, Andrew Schultz, Shane Gillis, all these guys that are big-time comedians that are on the up and up, they all latch themselves onto Trump and Trumpism. People like Russell Brand, who had no other options, latched themselves onto Trump and Trumpism. Your career circling the drain, like Hulk Hogan, latch onto Trump and Trumpism, right? All the richest people in the world are about to save a fortune, right? And they put their money where their mouth was. Elon Musk went on stage and jumped for joy. It's crazy.
Yeah, except for Taylor Swift. Shout out to Taylor. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that is what it comes down to, Zach, because of the fact that almost everyone in this country is a low information voter that is really going on vibes, not policy, as much as it breaks our heart. We have to adjust to that. And obviously, we're going to still have substantive policy conversations. I'm not saying that we're going to not talk about policy on the show, and I'm not saying that it isn't the number one most important thing, when obviously it clearly is. That's what this is all ultimately about. But yeah, what it comes down to is that we need to make the left cool again. That is what it is. And I think that it's a real sign of the topsy-turvy, crazy, upside-down world that we're living in, that someone like Joe Rogan, and not just Joe, but this whole sphere of like pot-smoking comedians. Why are these people on the right? Why is the pot-smoking comedian crowd all of a sudden on the Republican side? That's upside down. That's not how it should be. The left is the side that smokes weed. It's us. We're the ones who are funny. We're the ones that like drugs. We're the ones that are pro-sex. We're the ones that are the hippies. We can't abide this. We can't abide this. We cannot abide this cultural shift. We cannot let the Republican people, the right-wingers, we cannot let them claim the mantle of being cool. We cannot let them pretend to be more anti-war than we are. That's another big thing. A lot of Republicans have successfully seduced the American people to their side by tricking them into thinking we're the anti-war side. Like they're the new fucking hippies somehow. You know what I'm saying?
Doesn't hurt when Dick Cheney and his daughter are out with the Democrats.
Exactly. That's what I mean. The Democratic Party allowed the Republican Party to claim the mantle of counterculture. All of a sudden, Republicans are weed-smoking, anti-war hippies listening to the Grateful Dead. What is happening? No, we have to return to counterculture as a left. And I'm not talking about super edgy bullshit that turns people off. I'm not talking about, handing out Trotsky pamphlets to people. No, none of that bullshit. I'm talking about re-embracing genuine counterculture, because right now the fucking Tim Dillons and the Joe Rogans and all of these Gen X millionaires, all of these fucking lame losers have somehow stolen away that mantle from us. And I swear to God, it's imperative that we take it back from them. We cannot be the side of Liz Cheney. We cannot be the side of fucking San Francisco, Silicon Valley bullshit. No, this cannot be abided.
Yeah, this aggression will not stand, man.
Christ. So, like, you didn't consider policy at all? Just, Trump's real because he went on a podcast. Kamala's not because she didn't go on that podcast. Like, oh my God. Oh, Jesus Christ. So did he have an impact on the election? Look, I think he probably did. I think he did. And you also got to call a spade, that interview. That interview that Rogan did with him was a hot stone massage, right? He didn't ask any serious questions about policy, about his crimes, none of it. So you sit there and play patty cakes with the guy for 3 hours, and would you look at that? You humanized him. That's the exact thing Rogan said years before when he was asked if he'd interview Trump. That's the exact thing he said. I worry about that. I don't want to humanize him because I don't know all the ins and outs of the allegations of the corruption against him and the war crimes he did and all the problems, and I'm not the guy. I don't have the tools. Well, Joe.
And I think that also signifies a cultural shift, Gavin, especially from 2016 to 2024. The amount of cultural disdain directed at Donald Trump fell off a cliff, right? And you and I, or at least I'll speak for myself, I thought, that's a signal of a weakness for Trump. That's a sign of him not having the riz and not having the punch and power that he had in 2016, right? He doesn't have Hillary Clinton as his foil to make all of his same lines against. He's not as, incendiary, it seems. The media is not constantly covering stories about him like they were in 2016. A lot more people are just less taken aback and offended by him. That actually really helped him. That laundering of his reputation, that making him just seem like more of a regular guy who's just a little rough around the edges. All of that effort from guys like Elon Musk, from guys like Patrick Bet-David, the comedians you laid out, Gavin, Joe Rogan himself, to launder his reputation and make him seem like just a likable guy that was really misunderstood and targeted by the media. And aren't there people like your favorite comedians that have been targeted by the media? Remember when Dave Chappelle was targeted by the media? Oh yeah, when you really get to know the guy, when he really sits down with him, he's a great guy. Donnie, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And don't you think that's another reason? Like, again, I hate to say it, I don't want to sound like one of these people, but don't you think that the left totally needs to abandon any semblance of like moralizing? Like, don't you think that needs to go out the window? Because I do. I think we're at the point where, the backlash against it is real, and we do have to talk about it. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think against regular people for sure, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to stop dunking on Anna Kasparian when she makes stupid positions from like under the banner of the Young Turks Progressives. But I do think that when it comes to audiences, when it comes to reaching out to regular folks, yeah, we do. So I think, honestly, I'm going to revert back to the Michael Brooks strategy, right? I tweeted out this clip of Michael Brooks the other day where he was actually talking to Anna Kasparian. And I want to say it was the first time they ever spoke on air together. And she said, you know, she thanked him for being willing to call out and roast and lampoon Dave Rubin, and that it was important to her to be the bigger person. And he was like, no, you know, the Michael Brooks show is not a bigger person show, right? The Vanguard pod is not a bigger person show, right? We're happy to lampoon, dunk on, and go after other commentators, right? But what we can't do is write off their audiences. And that's what Michael Brooks understood. He understood that their audience was up for the grabs, even if they were a lost cause. So you have to embolden yourself. You have to elevate your own cause by exposing the shallowness and the hollowness of what's going on in the right-wing argument, right? The scapegoating of immigrants, the fact that it all will circle back to aid the 1% and not the working class, right? All of these different kinds of things. So I agree with you that the pearl clutching, the purity testing, all of that shit, like, we can't use it as a way of like gaining new supporters, right? But I also think that it does have a place when it comes to media critique, because you're going to see a lot of people flock to the right as a way of making even more money for themselves.
I mean, what do you in media critique? Like, I don't think that. Like, I'm not talking about what we do.
Oh, okay. No, I was saying, like, I'm not ready to. Okay, that I was a little confused, because I was like, I'm not ready to stop like dunking on people and do all that.
No. What we do is how the left should call people out. What we do is the proper. We are charting the path. We are showing you how it's done. We do get on their level. We do meet them where we are at, and we use their language against them. We use their cultural tactics against them. What I'm talking about is this bullshit, elitist, pearl clutching, and moralizing over normal people being normal people.
Oh, well, yeah, obviously, that shit. I just mean, like, I'm not afraid to get down and dirty still. No. This is still the Vanguard pod, after all.
I'm saying that's what we have to do.
100%.
Everyone has to take a page out of our book and fight this war like we have been, with brutal fucking honesty, and by not coming off like a bunch of pussy ass losers. I'm sorry, but it's true.
Yep. Pussy ass losers can't hang around me.
The chickens have come home to roost now, haven't they? So we'll see what happens from here. But my guess is, if Joe is being honest, big if, then moving forward, there's going to be plenty of things Trump does that he's like, ooh, ugh, I don't know about that one, dog. And we'll see now if he bothers to say it, or if, you know, the transformation is so completely and utterly and thoroughly complete that now criticizing Trump is out of bounds, right? So I just want to put this in perspective for you guys. This was This was Joe just a few years ago. Years ago. This is the sort of stuff he was saying on his podcast. And this is the guy who eventually ended up endorsing Trump. Watch this.
I really believe if Michelle Obama runs, she wins. She's good. She's great. She's the wife of the best president that we have had in our lifetime. I've never voted right wing in my life. I consider universal basic income a really good idea. I want free college education. Take it easy. Hello, Bernie.
How are you, Joe?
Wonderful. Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I like Tulsi and I like Bernie. That's it.
Oh, yeah?
Everybody else can eat shit.
Look at you, fucking progressive.
Yeah. I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. I think he's looking out for the interests of the working people. And I think he wants people to have a better life and do better. And I'm all for that. And if that means I have to pay more in tax, like people think, oh, you're a socialist. I've heard people say that. Oh, you're a fucking socialist, bro. Like, first of all, he's not even a socialist. He's a democratic socialist. It's a different thing. I would like to spend more in taxes if they could fix inner city communities and take these poor neighborhoods and spend a fuckload of money. Spend more, you fucking Republican piece of shit. 87% of scientists said that human activity is driving global warming. I'm very pro-choice. I'm very women's rights, civil rights, gay rights, trans rights. I'm even universal health care. Obviously, this protected status is driving me crazy. This thing that Trump's doing with children that were born in other countries and then brought over here as children, and then they're talking about deporting them. That drives me fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's
that kind of shit. And the hard right version of that is despicable. These people that I see online, why didn't they apply for citizenship? Oh, who knows? Maybe because they're fucking 13. I don't give a fuck if they broke the law. You don't take parents and kids and separate them. You just fucking don't. You know Alonzo? No, it was a funny comedian. Yeah. He goes, not all Donald Trump supporters are racist, but all racists are Donald Trump supporters.
He definitely awakened that side.
But the January 6th thing is important.
See, it is important, but is it the 6 months later? It should be the ruling number one conversation of journalists?
I think it's really important. And one of the reasons why I think it's important, because it highlights the reasons why a guy like Donald Trump is so fucking dangerous, is because a guy can incite a bunch of morons to do something really fucking stupid. As far as trans people, some trans people listening to this, I got nothing but love for you, for everybody. And in fact, Eddie Izzard is one of my all-time favorite guests.
Oh, I love Izzard.
The right-wing thing is just an easy way to dismiss me, because I'm not right-wing. I can't recommend your book, Race Matters, enough.
Apparently, the right-wing thing was not an easy way to dismiss him. He ended up endorsing the far-right candidate, right? Look, I hate to say it, but the criticisms of him were correct. The people who were really harsh on him when I was easier on him, no, he's a good guy. He means well. He's trying his best. He's advocating good ideas. You guys are just hyper-focusing on the times when he says the wrong things. And he ended up endorsing the guy who's...
Sorry. I actually think this is irrelevant, Gavin. I actually think it's irrelevant whether or not Joe Rogan was ever a good guy. I think it's irrelevant whether or not he was ever authentically interested in progressive politics and moving the ball forward. I don't care if it was all cosplay. What Kyle did that was very, very important was he was the voice for the left on that podcast. He went on half a dozen times, and he always gave a full-throated, relatable, non-cringe, class-based, I'm not throwing any marginalized groups under the bus, but I am prioritizing things that will lift all boats. He made it accessible for Rogan. When Rogan would throw out bullshit at him, they argued about Medicare for all one time. And he was like, no, Joe, remember, we already talked about this the last time I came on. You actually agreed with me, and you made a great point when we were talking about the fire department. And I remember that Kyle used that rhetorical tactic that was awesome because he made Joe right, even when Joe was like, even when he was correcting him. He was like, oh, no, Joe, remember the last time I was on here, you made this great point that also is my point that I fed to you, right? But then bringing it back up and him being like, oh, yeah, that is right. I do kind of see that, right? And it rationalized it. It planted the seed in his audience. And Kyle was never the blue-haired SJW liberal that all of Joe Rogan's like intellectual dark web guests would portray him as. So even if, Kyle may have sincerely believed that he was reaching Joe, and we'll never know if he was, he played such a role culturally and making sure that Bernie Sanders was part of Joe Rogan's worldview, getting Bernie on the podcast, right? These things had tremendous value as we're seeing now. So I don't think that Kyle should feel the least bit of shame. I think the way that he approached this situation tactically was perfect. And he was probably one of the key reasons that Joe Rogan was able to hold on to not being a right winger for so long.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think Kyle did anything wrong at all. I think that, it's not like Joe Rogan would have been convinced by Kyle if Kyle had come in there like some smug asshole, David Pakman style, to lecture Joe Rogan about how wrong he was. Like, no, Kyle did the best he could. And ultimately, yeah, I think that what happened with Joe, as much as we are trying to give the left pointers strategically and try to figure out how we could avoid this happening next time, ultimately with Joe Rogan, yeah, I think it was Dana White, his personal connections to these rich ass people, and he was just pressured by his friends into becoming a Trump propagandist. So, ultimately, I do think that is a big part of the reason why Kyle's so upset. Because, like you said, Zach, he did all he could. He did the best he possibly could. And what it ultimately came down to is corruption. I mean, let's be honest, on a personal level, Joe Rogan was corrupted into doing this. And his brain has just been corrupted by stupidity as well.
And wealth, yeah.
Yeah, but do you want to take just a little bit more of this in,
sure.
Zach? It gets a little bit better.
Stands against virtually everything he claims to believe in, right? And because of his humanization of Trump, because of his patty cakes interview with Trump, it had the exact effect that Joe himself feared it could have. Humanized him enough where it got him more votes. And look, what I would say to Joe is this video here is heavy on policy. Where was all that talk with Trump? Where was the homework you were supposed to do to learn about what this guy actually did, right? Nothing serious came up. He didn't talk about Trump signing a bill to gut internet privacy rights, a bill that had 6% support. He didn't talk about Trump trying to do his healthcare bill, which was called Trump Care, which overturned protections for pre-existing conditions. He didn't talk about Trump's tax cut for the wealthy, where 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%, which, by the way, let's just call space spade again, Joe is very wealthy.
And I think that Kyle, again, I really do admire his commitment to policy substance. It's what he always makes the focal point of his arguments. When he does a video like this, he tends to really focus on policy. And obviously, that's the correct move. But, Zach, do you think that it's possible that as a left, as a movement, we should focus a little bit more on culture than policy substance? Obviously, the people in power behind the scenes, it's their job to focus on policy substance. But when it actually comes to winning over apolitical folks when it actually comes to winning over people that aren't already interested in politics? Don't you think it maybe is a little bit more of an intelligent idea to meet them where they're at, as I've been saying, in the realms of culture instead of in the realms of policy? Because this election just proved most people don't care about policy. Most people are not policy people. They really don't care about this stuff. They are voting based on vibes, and they, for whatever reason, identified the right wing to be the side where they felt more at home, where they felt more connected with, pandered to, whatever. So how do you think the left can combat that?
For one, I mean, we talked a little bit about the fundamental thing as far as a media onslaught would go, right? And that's the one thing that we can really impact and move the needle on over here, if we can move the needle and impact anything, right? As far as from policy standpoints, we have to start winning on economic talking points. We have to start prioritizing the economy. We have to start talking about, I think, grocery prices. I think we have to start talking about the lived experience and day-to-day of the average American voter far more. I think we have to talk about, like, you know, like there are I saw a lot of memes, right, where it was like the average American voter when egg
But
prices.
Trump didn't do that. Trump, when he was asked about inflation, just said, we're going to drill, baby, drill. Like, that's not why he won either. That's my point.
I mean, I think it was a rejection of Joe Biden's economic policy that motivated a lot of Trump voters to come out 100%.
Oh, I agree with that. I'm just saying, I don't think that Trump won because he was really able to convince Americans that he understood their economic situation. Like, he over and over again spat in their faces in that regard.
I still think the uninformed voter voted for him because they thought that he would fix the economy as a critical part of why they made that decision. At least from what I've been reading from people who have said this is why I voted for Trump. Like, people will be like, bro, groceries were expensive, bro. Like, you know, that shit is so expensive. Oh my God, things are so expensive, right? That is why they rejected the incumbency, you know, and I think that if you want, like, you know what I mean? And I've seen some people, you know, start to talk about this, Gavin, and I would love to get your analysis. Some people were weighing that the incumbency is now a detriment to re-election. Yep. And I think that's only true if you're doing a dog shit job, if you run on a bunch of things that you don't end up doing, right? And that was the problem for Joe Biden. Like, yes, he stood on the picket line for the first time ever. Guess what? Union voters, they went overwhelmingly for Trump across the board pretty much, which is a bummer and something that we have to reckon with. But again, I just think there was this, and it didn't come from Trump himself at all. It came from the machine around him. It came from the media vehicle around him. But I think a lot of people were convinced that the economy would get better if Donald Trump were in office. And I think that's something that the left needs to do a lot better job of messaging on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right that Harris, her ultimate flaw was refusing to separate herself from Joe Biden, refusing to condemn some of the policies that the American people were clearly unhappy with and chart a new path forward. She kept talking about going forward, not back, but refused to ever truly explain what that forward actually meant. So I agree with you there. But I also don't think that Donald Trump succeeded because he was able to do that either. Like, Donald Trump didn't lay out a significant economic policy plan that I think really convinced anyone of anything. If, like, I think his tariffs, most people agree, will make inflation worse.
I don't think anybody that voted as a swing voter knew about the tariffs.
You don't think they knew about the tariffs?
I think most people, they just didn't know that Trump was a businessman on the TV all the time. Oh, the economy was better under Trump. Remember, before COVID, groceries were cheaper. I just think that was a huge part of it.
No, I agree. And that's why I'm saying that's my point. It wasn't the policy suggestion. Trump, it wasn't the tariff thing or any of these stupid policy ideas that actually led to people having that idea of who Trump was. Right?
Oh, 100%.
So my point is, how does the left counter that? Because clearly we can't just talk about policy substance. That's not going to work. People are just going to vote for whoever they think is the big, strong leader man who can boss around Putin and make the prices go down or whatever. Like, people are dumb as fuck. And we have to meet them there. So I don't just think like Elizabeth Warren style, here's a document full of policies to explain away the issue. And I'm not even saying that's what you're saying. I'm just saying I hear this a lot from the left, even from Kyle, who I really appreciate. And I really admire his commitment to policy substance, but I just don't think that's the answer here. I don't think that if Kamala Harris had a binder full of fucking policy documents, even if they were all written by Bernie Sanders himself, like, I don't think that would have won her the election. I think it really was more of a cultural thing. And
that wasn't what I was arguing at all.
Okay, well, what were you saying?
I was saying that they need, like, like when I say address the economy, I don't mean have a binder full of like legislation. I don't know where you got that idea from. What I'm talking about
I was
is
addressing what Kyle was saying about substance.
Gotcha.
And saying that, like, yes, it's annoying that people like Joe Rogan aren't basing their votes on substance. Kyle lays out this whole argument.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with that. But all I was saying is that you need a home run. You know what I mean? You need to say, this is what we're going to do to fix the economy. When I'm the president, like you need to contrast Donald Trump, right? You need to be the left-wing version of Donald Trump. You need to be the Jesse Ventura. What are we always talking about on the show? What Jesse Ventura went up there and he said, he went in, he spat a progressive coded, populist coded message about the economy to people that was 100% from the hip that anybody could recognize, which was, guys, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to balance the checkbook, and whatever the fuck is left over, I'm sending right back to you, right? That was how he went, and that was a big motivator for a lot of people. It was like, oh shit, really? And then guess what he did, guys? He fucking balanced the checkbook, and he sent checks back to the people of Minnesota. It was extremely popular. I'm not saying that's the best strategy for the left to adopt now, but they need a home run strategy like that. We need the economic build a wall. Why did Bernie Sanders succeed? Because he had Medicare for all. It was exactly what you mentioned with the TJ Kirk analogy, right? He's promising to do something big. He's promising to do something that will change your life. The left needs to figure out what we can convince people is truly accomplishable and is a huge fucking swing. What made Andrew Yang popular? UBI, giving people $1,000 a month. We need to find a big, huge, change your life policy that's progressive and popular as fuck, and we need to never stop talking about it. We need to never shut the fuck up about it, right? I agree we never abandoned Medicare for all. Of course not. We never stopped talking about the Green New Deal. Of course not. But we need to think of what is the new. This will change your life. This will make your economic woes far less severe. You're going to feel comfortable, right? Like I remember being in COVID, Gavin. We talked about this a lot. We would have never been able to start this podcast if it hadn't been for COVID and the checks that everybody got. I bought my laptop that we used to start this. You had time off of work. All of that could have been a social policy that changed people's lives forever, giving people that money, giving people mandatory time off of work for a long period of time to be able to pursue their dreams. I think the left needs to marry ourselves to some sort of, marketable policy like that, and then also make it a cultural weapon, right? Threading the needle. I feel like the right does that very well. They take a political issue and then they marry it to a cultural issue, and they have like a double whammy.
Yeah, totally. I also think that Hysteric Raider is correct when he says, I think people wanted a leader. Harris is a manager. And I think that articulates what I've been trying to say better than just about anything Hysteric Raider. It's like, ultimately, whatever the fuck these candidates stand for policy-wise, I just don't think it's as important as I previously did. And I think that even under Obama, you look at the way he campaigned, and it was like, yeah, he was campaigning on policy, but what he really was campaigning on was change. This idea of there will be change if I'm elected. That didn't happen, but Donald Trump did the same thing. Kamala Harris never really quite was able to articulate how the country would change. She just kept saying, we're going to go forward, which doesn't really mean anything.
Or not backward.
It kind of just signified to people, this is going to be Joe Biden 2.0, which was not popular. I think another thing which is interesting about the appeal of Donald Trump, and this was proven in the primary, in my opinion, is that Donald Trump is not, like, I don't think to a lot of people he comes across as terribly ideological, right? Compare him to someone like Ron DeSantis, who does. Ron DeSantis is a very ideological person, like a Ted Cruz type. He has an ideological doctrine that he's going to follow, and he's not very flexible. Donald Trump, I think he comes off as, for whatever reason, a lot more flexible to people, even though we know he's a fascist that wants to rule with an iron fist, right? There'll be instances like in Florida where Donald Trump endorsed the legalization of cannabis. Remember that?
Which failed.
Yeah, which failed, unfortunately. But still, Donald Trump was like, yeah, I'm in favor of it.
Because ultimately he's self-serving, right?
He's self-serving, but I don't know if it necessarily comes off to people like that. I think to him, that's part of the reason why he comes off as a cool Republican, because he will endorse legal weed. And he will, say things that seem more culturally liberal. He doesn't seem like a total Puritan when it comes to cultural issues, even though he oftentimes surrounds himself with people like Mike Pence or J.D. Vance, who's obviously right out of this whole like neo-Puritan tradcath movement. Donald Trump himself actually does not come off like a Puritan at all. I think he comes off as the more fun candidate. Again, he leans into issues like weed more than your average Republican. I think he was better at this stuff in 2016, actually. A lot of it's faded, but I still think it's very central to his appeal. And again, I just feel like the next leader of the Democratic Party, whoever the left puts up to take on this guy, we need to understand that. And we need to meet people where they're at in a cultural way, not just in a super ideological way. Like, I almost think, and again, I hate to say it, but I think one of Bernie's mistakes was ever identifying as a socialist, even a democratic socialist. I think it made his program feel too ideological to a lot of Americans, and it scared them when he could have just cloaked it in common sense. Like, these are the common sense solutions that will uplift your life, that will make this country better, that will make this country great again. You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of coming at it through this like lens of ideology and like, I'm an old school socialist or whatever, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and there's a lot I want to respond to there, because I think you're right. And one of the reasons that, you know, I've been trying to be open to reflection, right? Because clearly I had been thinking one way, but if you practice the scientific method, you forecast, right? You have your prediction, and then, well, if it doesn't come out, your theory is debunked. Well, you have to learn from that and go back to the drawing board, and that's what I'm trying to do here. And I do think now, in hindsight, which is 2020, that when he was able to sit on the Flagrant One podcast or whatever it is with Andrew Schultz, and Andrew Schultz is sitting right next to him, and he's kind of like elbowing him, and he's kind of like making jokes with him, like Donald Trump is one of the guys, and he sat there and he took it completely normal. Like, Andrew Schultz didn't adjust his bits at all. He was like, are you sure you want to outlaw abortion? When you've got a 7-foot-tall Barron Trump ready to sling dick all over New York City. And Donald Trump is kind of like chuckling along and he's taking it, but it would be kind of unfathomable, right? For Kamala Harris to do that, right? She went on the Call Her Daddy show, but it was very sterile. It was very like, how does it feel to be like so attacked as the woman candidate? Wow, I'm sure that's a lot of pressure. Like, how do you feel about that, right? Which is not relatable to people who were not already going to vote for Kamala Harris. Everybody that listened to the Call Her Daddy podcast was going to vote for Kamala Harris or not vote at all, right? That, and I thought that was the case with the Joe Rogan experience, and I thought that was the case with the Tim Dillon podcast. But what it did was it actually did mobilize these young men to show up and vote in a way I thought they were going to stay home. I thought they were going to stay home, and instead it was the Democrats that stayed home, and 10 million fewer people showed up for them. So the other side of that is, to your point, Gavin, the left next time has to be somebody that's cool. It has to be somebody that's relevant. It has to be somebody who doesn't take on the label of a radical while still presenting common sense ideas. And that's why I was really excited about Tim Walz, guys. And I think that was another thing that really intoxicated me almost about the last couple of months, because I never in a million years, you guys can go back, I gave Gavin so much shit. I was like, there is no way the Democrats are going to do anything but kick us in the nuts. And then I saw Tim Walz, and I thought he was exactly what Gavin mentioned, right? He was a guy who was like, it's not radical to feed kids lunch or breakfast. I'm a Midwesterner. If a kid knocked on my door and was like, I need a sandwich, I'm hungry, you bet your ass I'd give him that freaking sandwich, right? You know what I mean? That's how people live in the Midwest. That's how people believe here. So he ran on that, passed it, no problem, because he didn't make it socialism, because he made it neighborly. And that was one of the huge things that I loved about Tim Walz early on. We loved the weird tactic, and we also loved, it's not socialism, it's neighborliness. It's taking care of your community. Now, I think Tim Walz might be a sunk cost now. I don't think he's going to succeed in a 2028 primary, Gavin. But how do we take the best of Tim Walz and transpose it onto the next, the future candidate? Not to already be like wish casting onto another candidate, but also, who do you think, even just loosely speculating, is capable of getting that kind of a job done, given somebody that already has some sort of celebrity capital?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be talking a lot about that. I'm interested in your opinion on Jon Stewart, who we're going to get into in a second, because Kyle's fully boarded the Jon Stewart 2028 train. It does break my freaking heart that Tim Walz is going to be blamed for Kamala's loss, because, yeah, you're right. Tim Walz totally embodies what I just talked about. He's practical. He's reasonable. He does the common sense policies which actually make people's lives better, but he doesn't cloak it in like this ideology. It's just, yeah, this is common sense stuff. I'm the governor. My job is to make your life better. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what the left needs to have on the presidential level. Just someone who's like, yeah, I'm not an ideologue. I'm not trying to radically change the fabric of America. I'm just trying to uplift you. So I think, yeah, we need to figure out who that person is. We need to figure out how to hone in on those vibes. But also, I do think the left got a little bit carried away with the whole like we're the party of normies now. You know, and I gave them credit for the strategy because I thought it might work. You know, Donald Trump, he's a weirdo. He's off the deep end. We're normal. You know, we're patriots. We have camo hats now. And I do think we leaned a little bit too far into that. At least the Democratic Party did. I think they leaned a little bit too far.
I think the weird thing could have worked if they'd done it better, but go on.
I think the weird thing could have worked, and I think they should have leaned into that more. But like I said, I also don't want the left to abandon counterculture. You know,
100%.
I don't want the left to be the white picket fence party with Liz Cheney out on the stage. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, no, we should be the party of pot smokers and renegades and revolutionaries while also understanding how to meet people where they are. And I do think it's important to look back at like the 1960s when we have these conversations, because there was this renegade history on the left. Abby Martin, Hunter S. Thompson. But guess what? These people, they were radical and they were, wild, but they didn't have this weird, like moralizing energy. You know, it was debauchery, you know, it was sex and rock and roll and drugs and partying. It was this carnal desire manifest in an activist spirit. And nowadays, it does seem like the left is kind of soft. It kind of seems like the left is a bunch of managers.
A bunch of bitches
that want to tell people how to talk and how to live and how to think and what kind of media they can consume. And it's just not, it's not what
it's not cool.
Yeah, it's not.
It's soft. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, Gavin. And I think that, you know, obviously we're going to put our best foot forward. I've never really felt soft, right? I've never really felt like I was a super soft guy. I wasn't a soft moralizing leftist, but if anything, I'm more resolute to be even gradier, even rougher around the edges. And I think hopefully if we learn anything from this, it's that we have to bring back edgy humor. We have to bring back things that are fun. We have to stop being doom and gloom and start being, you know, exhilarating, start being, I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about just being a freaking racist comedian. I'm not talking about Tony Hinchcliffe. I'm talking about Abby Hoffman. I'm talking about Hunter S. Thompson. Read what these guys were talking about. You know, that's the energy that the left needs to embrace, not this bullshit edgelord. We're going to say something offensive and then cry when we get canceled. No, I'm talking about really embodying that energy of like, yeah, we're here to fucking meet people where they're at. We're here to battle the right wing. We're renegades. We're revolutionaries. We're here to get this shit done. But again, not in a weak sauce moralistic way. That's what I have to say. And I think that, yeah, Zach, we've been embodying that energy. This is not a note for us. This is not a note for freaking you. You know, we're some of the only motherfuckers, not to pat ourselves on the back, but we're some of the only people that actually fucking embody this energy.
Yeah. Let's hear some more from Kyle, though.
I wonder if that had something to do with it. He didn't talk about a predatory payday lender being picked to lead the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which screwed over regular Americans. He didn't talk about Trump deregulating deli meat, which led to 9 people being killed and 57 people being hospitalized. He didn't talk about,
horrifying. I didn't.
Trump specifically being directly responsible for overturning Roe versus Wade. He didn't talk about Trump presiding over a loss of 2.9 million jobs or him making $160 million from foreign countries while he was president in brazen and disgusting corruption, or the 5,000 kids that were separated at the border, or the attempt to do a Muslim ban, or his appointing more billionaires and Wall Street moguls in his administration than anybody in history, or him not getting an infrastructure bill through, or rolling back 112 environmental protections. Joe says he cares all about the environment. Trump rolled back 112 environmental protections. Maybe a question about that? Or the 30,573 lies he told in his first term. So look, forgive me if I sound frustrated, but I am frustrated because in this election, policy didn't really seem to matter much, if at all. Under Democrats, 50 million people got health care. Under Trump, 3 million people lost health care. Nobody cares. It didn't matter. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's having the conversation. Nobody's pointing out the facts. Nobody's educating people. They're sitting around shooting the shit and giggling with the boys, right? And the end result of that was what? People ended up supporting a literal fascist, right? Look, you can say that sounds hyperbolic. At this point, it's not hyperbolic remotely. The facts are the facts. The guy tried to overturn the last election. He tried to do an insurrection. He tried to do a coup. He did the fraudulent elector slates. He tried to force Mike Pence to reject the results of the election. When Mike Pence didn't, a crowd was chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and Trump said he deserved it. Trump knew the election wasn't stolen. He knew it. He called it crazy himself. He said to Mike Pence, "Mike, you're too honest," when he tried to get him to overthrow the election.
Also, Gavin, not to cut in too many times, but I saw somebody in our chat that I wanted to raise a question that I wanted to get you to talk to about, which is porn and weed. Good, keep cooking. I think, Gavin, an opportunity for the left to reclaim counterculture, to reclaim porn, to reclaim weed, booze, partying, having a good time consensually, right, is when they get really high on the Project 2025 shit and everybody is reminded that while it may be true what Gavin said, that, well, Trump didn't really give the vibes off of a Puritan. Like, Trump loves to get his dick sucked by a porn star and shit in a gold toilet. You know what I mean? That's the vibe he gives off. Oh, the vibe is that, yeah, I'd be down for legal weed. Like, oh, yeah, I'd be down for a 12-week abortion. You know, whatever. I only just upended reproductive health care for the women all across the country, but he didn't really mean it, guys. You know, it's just kind of wishy-washy. It was the Republican Party, not Trump, dude. Come on. You know what I mean? But there is going to come a day during the 2025 year, 2026 year, where people are like, oh shit, he's actually going to do some of this stuff. Wow. RFK is in charge of the FDA now. Wait, Elon Musk just abolished the Department of Education and gave himself $1 trillion in government contracts. Like, what in the heck? You know? And then they're going to ban porn unless you put in your ID. And a lot of people aren't going to feel comfortable with that. Dude, let me tell you, I would never put my ID into a porn website. Crazy. I work in media. Is that the opportunity for the left to dig in and really win some of these people back? Is that the opportunity for the left to really, create that wedge where it was like, these people lied to you. These guys Pied Pipered you. But now you can see the emperor has no clothes. They wanted to take all your rights away from you. They pretended they were cool and then turned around and stabbed you in the back, right? You thought you were getting to hang out with all the popular kids, but they were just going to handcuff you to the trash can and throw Rotten Tomatoes at you and take pictures.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think you're onto it, bro. That's it. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the left ceded these sort of vibes, this sort of countercultural feeling to the right. But they're going to immediately create the perfect, opportune conditions for us to take it right back. Because, yeah, Zach, as you said, in about 2 years from now, people are going to look around and they're going to be like, oh, shit, I don't want to live in this freaking theocracy. I don't want to live
Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, Mike Johnson telling me what I can't do. Because, yeah, those are the people that are actually going to be in charge. Donald Trump is not that ideological. He really just cares about himself. He likes praise. He likes to feel like he's in charge and see big crowds and stuff like that. But really, it's going to be Elon Musk and Mike Johnson and J.D. Vance in charge. And these people are not popular. People are not, they're not enamored with that brand of right-wing Republican politics. It might be, in vogue online to do the whole like trad cat bullshit where, we're going back to 1900 and get in the kitchen, bitch, or whatever. Like,
I've been saying that to Salisa, but she hasn't talked to me in a few days, so we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, that might be popular in some, online echo chambers or whatever, but most people, no, they don't want to have their freaking access to a porn website disabled. They want to be able to enjoy cannabis recreationally. Like, yeah, these are normal things now. I also wanted to throw this tweet up on screen from Kyle. He says, I've been on Rogan's podcast 4 or 5 times. He would always agree with my left wing and even anti-Trump arguments, but let's not infantilize him. He's a grown-ass man, and he eventually cocooned himself in a right-wing misinformation bubble surrounded by right-leaning, edgy comedians and even flat-out Republican propagandists like Ben Shapiro. He's responsible for his own radicalization. All that's left to do now is correct the tsunami of bullshit that emanates from his show on a weekly basis. So, yeah, officially the bridge has been burned. It's kind of already been burned, but I think that's pretty fair to say now it's officially been burned, because it seems like Kyle's kind of admitting here, like, even if Rogan did invite him back on, it's kind of pointless. It's kind of useless. He's already done that 4 or 5 times. His statement now, or his conclusion now, is that all that's left that we could possibly do is correct the tsunami of bullshit that emanates from his show on a weekly basis. And I'm not quite sure if I agree with that, Zach. I understand where Kyle's coming from, and I could sort of see how, like, he might feel like, oh, well, what am I going to just bang my head against the wall another time? But I don't think that as a left, I don't think we should abandon going on platforms like the JRE. I think that the left needs to send more people out into the mainstream. We need to send more people out, and not just to counter policy disagreements, not just to sit there and debunk every issue of policy substance, but to just present a cool look for the left, you know, an approachable front. Hey, I'm a lefty, but I'm still willing to, you know, sit here and drink whiskey with you and talk about sports and talk about aliens. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what the left should do.
Regular ass people.
If we, not that we ever would, but if we got invited on fucking Joe Rogan, I would not sit there and correct him. You know what I'm saying? I would not sit there and say, well, actually, and not to say that's what Kyle did.
No, he didn't. He did a good job.
I think Kyle did a really good job. But I do think it's important to have lefties that are just able to go in a space like that and have a conversation about sports, have a conversation about aliens or movies or whatever. And then, you know, get into policy via those topics, get into policy via those sort of conversations. But you don't just go in there and start by like, here's my list of policy achievement or policy issues I have with you. You know what I'm saying?
100%.